How would you finish this sentence? The best way to stop sinning is to blank. I think the world's best method for finishing that sentence goes something like this. The best way to stop sinning is to redefine sin so that I can keep doing whatever I want and just not feel guilty about it. That kind of reminds me of that old Peanuts comic strip where Charlie Brown is shooting an arrow into a barn wall and then he draws a bullseye around the arrow. Linus comes along and he says, "You don't do target practice that way. You draw the bullseye and then you shoot the arrow." And Charlie Brown says, "I know that, but if you do it my way, you never miss." By the way, I looked it up and apparently that one's a common misattribution. It sounds very Charlie Brownish, but it never actually appeared in a Peanuts comic strip. Keeping it real here. Unfortunately, though, the world's method is very appealing, and many Christians fall for it. If a certain sin is pleasurable, and it doesn't seem to hurt anybody, then maybe we can get away with not being too legalistic about it. Well, what has been the church's method for finishing that sentence? The best way to stop sinning is to make boundaries and get accountability. Hate the sin and fear its consequences. Hate yourself and vow never to do it again. Get biblical counseling. Avoid tempting circumstances. Change your friends. I could keep going. I'm not saying that all of these methods don't have any merit, but I will say this. Not one of those methods actually works. Most Christians know what it's like to have some sort of addictive sin in their lives that they are desperate to overcome. They've been taught in church about what they're not supposed to do, and they've been taught the unpleasant consequences if they keep doing it. So they try method after method, and they keep going through the same cycle. Indulge in a sin, feel guilty about it, and repent. Decide not to do it ever again and succeed for a while. Feel good about yourselves. And then stress or weakness causes them to fail just one time. And then that one failure leads them to despair, which leads them all the way back into indulging in the sin. Rinse and repeat. A long time ago, a friend of mine was leading a men's meeting on addictive sin, pornography. And he said this, "The only reason why you sin is because you love the sin more than you love Jesus." When I first heard him say that, I was indignant. Who are you to tell me that I love sin more than Jesus? I love Jesus with all my heart. And in fact, it's my love for Jesus that makes me fight so desperately to defeat this sin. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was absolutely right. In that moment of weakness, even if we know that it's fake or temporary, we love the pleasure or the satisfaction that sin gives us more than we love the pleasure and the satisfaction of intimacy with Jesus. And that, my dear friends, is the key to stopping sinful behavior. Just this last week, I was preaching from Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. These two verses set up everything that comes in chapters 12 through 15, which are filled with do this, don't do that commandments. And here's what they say. "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." Those two verses give us at least 4 very important principles about defeating sinful behaviors. And the first one is this: you cannot change your behavior through self-effort. You can only change your behavior through God's mercy. The more your focus is on trying to win the battle against sin, the more that sin just becomes the focus of your thinking. It's kind of like when someone says to you, do not, whatever you do, don't think about pink elephants. It just doesn't work. At the same time, number 2, you cannot change your behavior by the let go and let God method either. Doing nothing to combat sinful habits in your life means that you will keep on conforming to their patterns. Paul says, present. Do not be conformed, be transformed. These are all things that you do, but why you do them makes all the difference. And that brings up number 3. The key to changing your behavior is to focus on your worship instead of on your behavior. When you watch movies with explicit sex scenes in them, what are you worshiping? When you yell at your children, what are you worshiping? When you spend a lot of money on Amazon Prime for clothes that you don't need, what are you worshiping? And then we come to number 4. The method for changing your behavior is to renew your mind. Change the way you think. But change the way you think based on the mercies of God and motivated by worship for God. In other words, the only way to stop sinning is to learn to love Jesus more than you love the sin. If you are trying to figure out the best way to defeat sin, you're already asking yourself the wrong first question. The first question is, what is the best way I can love Jesus more? Try asking yourself that question for a while and see what happens.